we'll jump in. Okay, so good evening, everybody. A real pleasure to be here. Glad that you could make it, that we're all together, and that Comcast has cooperated so that we're. Some of you may not know that the whole system was down because of Comcast a little bit earlier. So that's all been fixed, very fortunately. So after the sitting this evening, the topic that we're going to be exploring is spiritual friendship, Kalyanamita. And I hope that this topic is as interesting for you as it has been for me in terms of going back and looking at this historically. And it's really kind of enlivened my whole idea about spiritual friendship, and at some level actually I think changed fundamentally some of my understanding of the value of a spiritual friendship. And so I always find that interesting because I've been practicing for a long time, and I always try to make a point and go back and look at the original suttas and see if based on my experience and the events that have happened in my life and my place in the Dharma, if my understanding has changed, if that original understanding that I had of some principle needs some fine tuning. So I'm kind of excited, really, about this talk and look forward to having a discussion with you about it. So we will sit for about 30 minutes, and then we're going to have a brief little talk by Robin, and then we'll break real quickly, and then we'll jump right into Kalyanamita. So just take a minute to get into a comfortable position. And my suggestion is to think of the idea of a comfortable position as one where your body supports your mind being awake and ready to engage your experience, to really fully experience it, to know what you're experiencing it and understand it as the preconditions for insight arising and for understanding arising. So I think it's important to take your time to relax any place in the body that is tight or stiff, but do it in such a way that you end up with a posture that is capable of supporting you, of having full breaths and being alert for the rest of the meditation. And just one other comment, if during the sitting you find that your mind or the body becomes sluggish or sleepy, make a point of doing something about it. And sensory awareness, the first foundation of mindfulness, is really a powerful and just simply a helpful way to wake the mind back up again. And I know that there is such stress on not moving, or relatively not moving. But if you're really sleepy, it's helpful just to open your eyes, not really that you're looking around the room, but opening your eyes to get some light in, and then allow your hands to touch your skin, feel the temperature, and open to your palm and feeling the crevices in the palm and the calluses and the bones in the fingers. And you just do a little bit of that kind of exploration. Just be creative. What seems to draw your attention, your mind will wake up right away, and then you can close your eyes and go back to the sitting. Some people find that you don't need to open your eyes, but do this kind of sensory exploration, which involves a little bit of movement. Might be that you explore your face with your fingertips very lightly. So this may sound unusual or a recommendation that you haven't heard before, but I think for community practitioners, we're so frequently um, having a sleepy mind that being creative and finding something that's effective in not just waking the mind up, but waking it up through curiosity is really good practice. Okay, and then I'll leave you to your own for the rest of the sitting. So, in the last few minutes of the sitting, we can begin to slowly start transitioning from this deeper interior dimension that we've been in to allowing our awareness to begin to move back out into the whole body and begin moving the body in relationship to the floor, feeling the floor on our toes and our feet, and the weight of our body on a bench or a cushion or a chair. Notice the contact of our hands with each other, or our legs, or the cloth on our legs. And begin to feel the contours of our body dimensionally in relationship to the rest of the room. And then just at your own rate, slowly opening the eyes and allowing them to begin to gently focus, and then to focus more clearly on the objects in the room. So welcome back. So, okay, I think I'll start in. Okay, welcome back, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. The discussion this evening is on the practice of spiritual friendship, which the historical Buddha called Kalyana Mitta. That's the Pali term for spiritual friend. And if you look at the historical Buddha's discourses, his suttas, he talked a lot about true and wise friends. And there's a whole series of suttas where he's emphasizing the qualities of relationship of a true and wise friend, that it's the foundation of community life and of Sangha, that a true friend is generous and sharing, they're patient, they're supportive, they're helpful, they're ethical in their relationship with you. If asked, they give good advice, and they show concern and support, not just for you, but for your family and your children. But he also talked about Kalyandamita, and he put this in a different class, and he said that being a spiritual friend was something more than just this kind of companionship or friendship. As important as it is, as important and valuable as it is, it was something different. So I'd like to talk about what Kalyanamita or spiritual friendship is and how it differs from regular friendship. And I'm hoping that you find this talk at least thought-provoking. I certainly have myself. So I'm going to start with a sutta that I think, a discourse that I think almost everyone has heard part of. And it's a very famous discussion between Ananda, the historical Buddha's cousin, and also his attendant. You get photographic memory. It's the reason that we have all of these suttas. And the format is that Ananda approaches the Buddha, sits down, and says something or asks a question. This is a format in a lot of the suttas. And Ananda ends up being kind of like a foil, that either what he's saying is partially true or wrong, and the Buddha corrects him and gives a talk. So in this case, the Ananda approaches him and says to the historical Buddha, good friendship and companionship are half of the spiritual life. And the Buddha responds, not so, Ananda, with an exclamation point. good friendship and companionship are the entire spiritual life. And my guess is that you may have been like me, that you've heard this many times, but never heard the rest of the sutta. And the question in my mind was, why and how could good friendship and companionship be the entire spiritual life? And so the Buddha goes on to say, says, good friendship and companionship are the entire spiritual life, because when a practitioner has a good friend and companion, the practitioner will develop and cultivate the Noble Eightfold Path. And how, Ananda, the Buddha said, does a practitioner with a good friend and companion develop and cultivate the Noble Eightfold Path? The practitioner develops, cultivates right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And then just this is, I think this is kind of cute at the end. He says, "Oh, and it also happens by relying on me as a good friend and companion. By doing that, the practitioner develops and cultivates the Noble Eightfold Path." So there's two implications for this. The first is that a true spiritual friend, the Kalyanamitta, is one who is helping us follow and stay on the path itself, the right path, that both the spiritual friend and the other person, two spiritual friends, are grounded in the Dharma and have a common aspiration for spiritual growth. So that means that the Four Noble Truths, the trainings of the Eightfold Path, ethical conduct, mental development, wisdom, are not just practices, but these are the grounding for both people's lives and their practices. So it encompasses the entire path, all the teachings. This is when the Buddha says, oh, and by the way, relying on me, he's including, it's Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Now, the second implication, I think, is fascinating and in a way a radical idea, because if spiritual friendship as defined is the entire spiritual path, what that means is that our individual development and our awakening, to the degree it's going to happen in this life, is dependent on our relationship with other spiritual friends. The reason that Kalyanamitta is the whole spiritual life is because the Buddha says we can't awaken without the support, encouragement, and the shared effort of a Kalyanamitta. And this is part of the Buddha's causation, that nothing appears on its own, including insight, wisdom, and awakening. It's based on the conditions that precede it. So that Kalyanamitta is one of the key conditions. It's a precondition to awakening. And it's part of the Buddha's worldview of interdependence, interconnectedness, interrelationship. So I think this is really it's just so significant. I can honestly say I've heard many talks on spiritual friendship, and I've never really heard, or if I did, I really didn't understand that Kalyanamitta spiritual friendship was part of the Buddha's worldview of causation, that everything arises from causes and conditions, and that our individual development awakening is actually dependent on our relationship with each other, if we're actually serious practitioners as opposed to just being hobbyists. There's a famous sutta that you may be familiar with, maybe not, where the Buddha studied with two renowned meditation teachers of his time, and there was one, Uddaka Ramaputta, and Ramaputta specialized in concentration jhanic states. And so the Buddha and the people that he was practicing with would get into these very elevated, rarefied, nuanced states of quiet, and then they would come out and report to Ramaputta their experience, a practice interview. And the Buddha comes out this one occasion, and Ramaputta says to him, well, you've made it, you're fully cooked, you've awakened. And this opinion by Ramaputta resulted in the historical Buddha walking away from working with him, because he said that Ramaputta was misevaluating his state, because he could reach these very rarefied, equanimous, compassionate states of mind in isolation and meditation. But when he came out and was in relationship in the practice interview, that he could still see that in relationship with another being, his mind was not at that level of equanimity and compassion, that these concentration states were temporary and otherwise. So you look at the Buddha's path to awakening. He didn't do it on his own. He practiced intensively with a small group of practitioners, Kalyanamittas, for 5 years. He then had this moment where he became awakened. The first thing that he does after he awakens, after he reflects on and considers what's just happened, is he searches out these 5 fellow practitioners and finds them and shares his experience with them. And then that results in the formation of a Sangha to create the condition, the Kalyanamitta, for people to support each other and to become awakened. So I think that this, in preparing this talk, I've shared this with a number of people, and almost everybody's response is that this sounds quite challenging. And the second idea is, well, how would we actually implement that today in this time? And I think there's several principles, suggestions that the Buddha made about reorienting our thinking and our attitude towards those that we consider to be fellow practitioners, Kalyanamitas, and then some specific proposals that I would like to share with you. So first of all, the principles. If our aspiration, our true aspiration in life is spiritual growth and to awaken to the degree that we can, and we understand that having a true spiritual friend, not just a companion or a friend, but a true spiritual friend, is a precondition to our individual spiritual growth, that my spiritual growth and development is dependent on you if we are in this relationship. If that's the case, the 2 things will happen. The first one is that my conduct, how I think about you, how I feel about you, how I relate to you, and how I treat you will be reflected from that aspiration and that understanding, that I will consider you and our relationship to be this very, very precious thing, because it is part of the conditions that allows both of us to grow spiritually and to potentially become awakened. And even with physical objects, we all know that if you have something that is really precious to you, that we treat it in a certain way, and that there are certain relationships that we treat preciously. So the first thing is that if this really is our aspiration, and we understand the nature of the relationship, then we'll act accordingly. And we don't do this as an obligation or a duty. We do it because of the shared reciprocal aspiration to support each other on the path. We're looking for how can we support each other, and how can we support each other living lives on the path. How we can we create lives that are more open, flexible, expansive, caring, satisfying through the Dharma? And then the second implication is that the relationship will act as a mirror. And by that, I mean that if our intention is to treat the relationship as precious and to use the relationship to help both of us point the mind towards what is wholesome, what supports insight, um, towards satisfaction and away from suffering, that if we act differently, if we act contradictory to that or inconsistent to that because of reactivity, all the many reasons that we do that, we'll see it because our intention is to be guided by this aspiration. So in addition to being this important part of the path, it's just a wonderful practice. It really wakes us up. So those are the two of a number of the principles. The second idea is the Buddha strongly advocated for Kalyanamitta that we reorient our thought thinking. And by reorienting our thinking, we reorient our relationship. And he talked about this in a number of ways, but in relationship to the Brahma Viharas, to loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. And just because of the limited amount of time, I'm going to use metta as an illustration because my sense is that most of us have some idea and have some level of practice with loving kindness. So this is a little different way of thinking about metta and the Brahma Viharas. And it's not just thinking of loving kindness as a meditation practice that we do in isolation, but that it is an active practice of relationship, of caring for and looking out for each other. The Buddha said that that starts with our thinking, that we make the world with our thoughts. And the first of the 8 steps on the Eightfold Path is right thought. So it's looking at and regularly, cultivating unconditional thoughts of friendship, of care, concern, of warmth, of generosity about our Kalyanamitta, our Kalyanamitas, our spiritual friend or spiritual friends. So it's not just doing this in meditation, but it's actively cultivating thoughts about friendship, care, concern, warmth, generosity, and that this includes reflecting on the value and the preciousness of spiritual friendship for ourselves, for the other person. I mean, what a gift. And for the cohesiveness of the community, and reflecting on the role that doing this plays in interconnection, interdependence, and causation, that we're creating a web of care and concern that's holding everybody. And the Buddha said that we should be actively inquiring, not waiting, actively inquiring, well, how can I be helpful to my spiritual friend or friends? How can I support them and be generous and caring to support their practices? And helping each other understand how practice applies to our actual lives. And what would that look like in our speech and our behavior? How would we respond as a Kalyanamitta? How would we support? And the practice that I've done from time to time is that I just kind of hold the idea that, well, what would it be like if the historical Buddha or many, you can pick out whoever you really like of all of these great circle of teachers that existed at that time. What would it be like if they were my co-pilot or they were hanging out with me for a day and I was around my spiritual friends? Would it affect how I act, how I speak, how I think. So we're talking about actually reorienting our thinking, and the idea is that internally that we're creating a relationship that is grounded and rooted in connectedness and appreciation. We're bringing in a special way, in a precious way, our spiritual friend within our circle of caring, concern, affection, in our Dharma life. To some degree, we're doing that with most of our friends. The difference here, though, is that we are, you and I, if we're in this kind of relationship, it's grounded in the Dharma. It's not just grounded in affection and warmth of um, a normal personal relationship. The Buddha said that we should do this regularly, so that the word is we should saturate our mind, our heart, and the relationship with these qualities. And so the intention is to use thinking to change, to create the conditions, once again, in the same way that Kalyanamita is a condition for spiritual growth and awakening. Thinking in this way, reflecting, active inquiry, as a way that leads to changes in feelings, behavior, speech, in outward conduct, in embodiment. So that when we're with the other person, we treat them uh, appropriately. You know, I'm talking about appropriate conduct here, but we treat them so that they feel that they're part of our circle of caring, that they feel that there's a common aspiration to help each other on the path. And I think the really important part about this is, and any of us who have worked with metta for a while know that when metta is present, when it's working, there's a sense of lightness, of openness, of connection, expansiveness, and of joy. And so, doing this as part of being a spiritual friend is a source of inner satisfaction and happiness and harmony that we can really only find in the Dharma. It's a special form of satisfaction and happiness and of harmony. And it's because these qualities are all arising, the affection, the care, and the support are arising from a pure aspiration in the Dharma, not from craving, attachment, and identification. So the last thing I'd like to mention here, and then we can talk about this a little bit, is the series of what I consider to be practical recommendations based on the model that the historical Buddha set up for the monastic order. And here in the West, you know, we're taking all kinds of things that previously were monastic and adapting them to modern life. For example, depending on what expert historian you talk to, somewhere between 65 and 80% of all of the suttas, discourses the Buddha gave, were not available to lay people at the time of his life. It's just the reverse. I mean, we're routinely working with suttas that are quite complex and advanced. So I think that the model is really helpful, and particularly for uh, the regular monk, monk or nun. And the model is that you would, since there was no writing and no reading, you would listen to a Dharma talk. You would reflect on it, question that in relationship to what you know, and then you would discuss it with your peers. And this was done in small groups. And in some traditions, they've actually formalized this. In Tibetan Buddhism in particular, this model of listening and now reading, questioning and reflecting, and then discussing in small groups, you know, exploring our own individual experience of what you've heard or read is actually formalized. So that happens, and then the next stage is that everyone sits engages in daily life, tries to apply this exploration, see what happens. Does it, in fact, point the mind in the right direction or not? And then, same thing, get together in small groups, or just 2 monks or 2 nuns, and share your experiences, the experiences in meditation, in reflection, in your daily life. And so this is so valuable if you have someone like this. And I'm not talking about just coming and listening like something like this, or um, going to a group at the center, as valuable as that is. This smaller, particularly one-on-one sharing, helps you clarify and refine what you know, what you don't know, what you're confused about, because you're actually sharing this in a more intimate way with another person. And you have to develop the ability to talk about your experience. And then if there's confusion, you seek clarification from one of the teachers or someone who's further down the path. And this was in the suttas, you'll see this regularly. It's a motif where a series of nuns or monks will be discussing an issue, and there's varying views or controversy or questions, and they'll approach a senior monk and ask, and the senior monk will clarify it, and then they go to the Buddha, or the senior monk goes to the historical Buddha and repeats what the senior monk had said, and the Buddha either approves it or clarifies it further. So I think that this is just like a wonderful model for understanding how we can have individual relationships, or 2 or 3 people. We sit together sometimes. We intentionally set aside time to talk about, share our experience of a talk, of something we've read. But more importantly, we talk about our actual experience from a Dharma perspective. So it's a Dharma exploration. And this results in a deeper, more expansive, and intimate understanding of the Dharma itself, because you're having to clarify your experience and what you know and what you don't know. And equally, it results in a deeper, more expansive and inner relationship with the other person. I've been fortunate to have these relationships. I had a very close friend who recently died, and we did this for 30 years. And because of the unique nature of this practice, where we're non-judgmentally exploring how our minds work, and mind states and craving and attachment identification, you get to know someone else and their mind in a way that you frequently don't, even with people that you live with and you're very intimate with them, because there is a reciprocal joint aspiration to do this, to use this as a way of growing spiritually. And the one of the values of it is that you know that there's somebody who's looking out for you and cares for you in this dharmic way, that the warmth and affection is not coming from craving or attachment or identification. It's coming from the aspiration that each of us support the other in our spiritual growth. So I think I'm going to stop at that point, and my guess is, my hope is that there's going to be thoughts and comments about this, and we have a little time to do that. So I'm going to open it up now for questions and comments.
Thank you, Dennis. For those of you on Zoom, if you have a question or comment, you can raise your hand, either the Zoom hand or your physical hand. And Mariah is in the hall, and she's going to be handling any questions in the hall. Marcia, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah. Hi, Dennis.
Hey, good evening.
Good evening. So from what you have described, it kind of sounds like there's someone in the mix of the relationship who has either more experience or has a level of understanding that's more in depth, like that you would refer to or that you would ask. If the relationships are, equal in their understanding of the Dharma or of the practices or whatever, would that be suitable, or do you need to refer to somebody who has more education or experience or something?
Yeah, great question. And just before I answer that, one thing that I neglected to say is that, these kinds of relationships are going to be at various levels or dimensions. You're going to have relationships, like I mentioned, with this buddy of mine, for 30 years, that is really this in-depth thing. And then you'll have other relationships which are relatively new, but have an intimacy and value to them because of this acknowledged shared aspiration. And the Buddha said that, that it takes a while to develop these kinds of relationships and to know whether or not, we're all wounded at some level. We all come into practice suffering, and some of this can be tricky for some people. They get confused about what does like dharmic intimacy mean as opposed to craving and attachment. But to Marcia's question, and the reason I use the suttas with the monks and the nuns, the assumption is that the assumption of the suttas is that everybody is basically at the same level. Like in just on the screen tonight or in the Dharma hall, there's varying levels, but to some degree, we're all kind of in the mix and we're community practitioners. So the idea is that we're supporting each other, and our life experiences are different. So even on the same thing, the same topic, each of us is going to hear it slightly different. And then in terms of applying it in our lives, we may apply it slightly different. And that is so rich in, I love practice interviews because people will come in and say, well, they're able to report back quite clearly what was in the Dharma talk, and then they'll explain how they applied it. And it's not uncommon it's just kind of amazing. Like, I would have never thought that. It's like, and I'm supposed to be the senior person. So it's based on the principle that we're kind of honestly looking at our conduct, so that if we're confused, that then we seek out the more senior person or a teacher. And that we have the kind of relationship where if one person says, oh, well, that Dharma talk and Dennis said X, and well, what that means for me, and it's clear that the person is confused about that that's not what the principle means, that the other person's willing as part of this joint aspiration, and there's a permission to say, well, let's look at that because that was not my understanding of it, and this is the reason. So there's this kind of, I think, rich give and take between people who are willing to be honest and candid with each other. So does that answer it? Okay. Okay.
Sure.
So
Sure.
Roseanne? Oh, excuse me.
Thank you. Is anyone in the hall have a question before we go to the Zoomers? I think we're okay. Oh, wait. Nope. Okay. So, Philip, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask a question.
Hi, Dennis. Thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Yeah, good evening.
You mentioned earlier in your talk that when you presented your ideas to some reviewers, their response was it sounded very difficult. And I'm wondering if they elaborated on what they meant by difficult, or just explain what that means.
I'll give you my impression. And my impression is that in the West, we have developed a model which is primarily based on coming together, hearing a Dharma talk, and then leaving. And that many sanghas, you folks have, I think, what I would consider to be a Kalyanamitta group on Tuesdays that's facilitated, which is really rich. A lot of groups don't. And so if you're, what this idea of spiritual friendship is actually about having individual or small group, 3 or 4 relationships where you're communicating with each other, supporting each other, studying together. And so, this was provocative for me, for people to say, well, it sounds difficult, because it shows that the model of how they're thinking of practice is coming together in a group, hearing a talk, questions, and then going back and practicing fundamentally in isolation. So this is breaking that model. It's going to the most fundamental principle that the Buddha was trying to advocate, of interconnection in a relationship. So I think that's what it is. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thanks, Phil.
We have a couple questions on Zoom, but anyone in the hall? Okay. Roseanne, please unmute.
Hey, hello. Thank you so much, Dennis. This is the first time I've met you or heard you talk. And I really, really enjoyed it. It's been very illuminating and helpful. I have been part of a Kalyanamitta group. It's probably about 25 years now that we've been together. And we do have, I think, somebody that we consider our leader, our teacher. And she is in her 90s now, and has over 60 years of experience. So she kind of started the group, and we just look to her as our, she gives metta at the end, and we just all, love her and her guidance. But I just wanted to say that over the years, there's probably about 12 people that we all were there, but we meet on Fridays, and we're on Zoom now because our teacher Nancy moved to Carmel. The rest of us live in Chico. And we've been we've been through death, divorce, cancer, Alzheimer's. We've been through it. We're all getting older, and those things are visiting us. And I just can't even imagine how I would have navigated my life thus far without this group. And so I totally understand what you're saying about the importance. And I haven't heard that sutta before, and I really, really love it. The importance of the spiritual friend, whether it be one or a few of you. But I just right now we're kind of completing. We usually read a book, and we're reading Ram Dass's and Maribe Bush. Is called Walking Each Other Home. And
Yes.
I feel like as a group, as a Kalyanamitta, that's what we're doing with each other. We're walking each other home. And
Yeah, fantastic.
and
Yeah,
so I just so wholeheartedly believe, I just really grokked what you were saying tonight. And I've just started my own little sangha with people that have been in my classes before. And just this year I started a sangha, and we meet monthly. One thing that I've started doing, and this came from my teacher, Heather Sundberg, is that we have group discussion, and then we break out and we do either dyads or triads, where there's small groups. So I'm really glad to hear you say that that's such a wise thing to do, because it seems that way, to give those people that wouldn't speak out a chance to really say what they need to say and be heard. So anyway, thank you very much.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. You know, it's anybody who's been in this kind of a group would certainly echo what you're saying. And the counter point on this is IMS and Spirit Rock have both, from time to time, really tried to promote Kalyanamita groups.
Mhm.
There's a whole series of guidelines, and the problem that they have had, and that I've seen with a number of different sanghas, is that unless there's this underlying commitment to be a Dharma group, that what happens is that the groups devolve into being social groups,
Yeah.
which is a different thing. It's, you know, so what's happened, like Gil Fronsdale's group, IMC, for example, they have a separate series of activities that they call Friends of IMC. So if people want to go to movies together, or go hiking together, or camping together, that's Friends of IMC. If you want to have a Kalyanamita group, then we're talking about this kind of thing.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
so thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
So I think we got time for maybe one more here.
Charlie, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, I just want to thank you, Dennis. That was a wonderful talk. And I really commend all you guys who put this together as a multi-media type meeting. That's really cool, especially with this heat here.
I'm having real trouble understanding you, Charlie.
Does that help? Can you hear me better with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, my bandwidth here in Grass Valley, especially with the heat heating up the towers, can be difficult. I just want to commend you guys for how well you've been doing, you know, to do this multimedia type, meeting. It's been great. I really enjoyed the talk today and the teaching. Just kind of want to surmise in my mind what you're kind of saying. Like when I look at trying to practically apply this to going to the mountain stream sangha, that, you know, I have the bigger sangha, which is all the 200 odd people and the people who join from other cities. You know, that's kind of like you said, the social sangha, right? But then when I go into the temple, that it's advised by what you were talking about, that I have like a smaller intimate group where we actually focus on, you know, the Dharma, the writings. We talk about it like maybe, you know, what I call a book study, what I've done with other groups. And then also, you know, within that group, you have kind of like your spiritual leader, which might be one of the teachers there, and or then guys, or generally I promote, you know, just male, female differences, but, you know, I'm open to all of it. And then I have that smaller group where we support each other, kind of not just on like reading that weekly thing together, but maybe outside of that, like you said, we might go do social things, but we also answer that phone or talk on a daily or semi-daily basis to support each other. Like
Yeah, very nice.
Like Roseanne was saying, you know, getting through these divorces and these deaths and all these things. Am I understanding and interpreting that kind of the general message from like my simplistic point of view?
Yeah, I think the way to think of this is that practice and relationships are there's different levels and different dimensions. So, you know, I think the purely social aspect of people who are on the path getting together, potlucks are incredibly important. But you know, like all things in the Dharma, it's just being clear about what you're doing and what your intention is and why. So, you know, the intention is different there than when we're in the Dharma hall together. And then there's another level of depth when you're in like your Tuesday night Kalyanamita group in terms of intimacy and sharing. And then there's another dimension, another level when it's one-on-one or two or three of you who, I mean, are like kind of going for it. So it's not that, you know, there's nothing negative here about all the different things. It's just understanding that there are different dimensions, and a good practice is trying to incorporate all of them. and that you, if possible, you want to be able to develop a relationship with a small group of people or a couple of friends or a small group of friends that really has some depth and intimacy from a Dharma perspective. This is the key idea. So, I mean, it was fascinating for me to go back and look at the suttas, and particularly this sutta, because I had never heard anyone read the whole sutta. And that the idea is that the reason a spiritual friend is the whole spiritual life is because once you're in that relationship, you're both developing, co-creating all of the elements of the path together. So it's really, I mean, it's really a beautiful idea, and it fits in with, you know, the causation and conditionality and interconnection. It puts the whole thing together. So I hope that this was helpful for you tonight, and if nothing else, thought provoking. So. So I'm just going
to. Dennis, I just wanted to, there is one person that had a question if we have a few moments in the hall. So if you're in the hall, just turn on the mic and ask your question very concisely.
Can you hear me?
A little bit, if you.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Hi, my name is Jay. I had a question about if there's general minimum experience that's recommended for starting these groups. I know in my own personal experience, when I began this practice and I would be talking with more experienced people, I could fall into a trap of thinking that if I wasn't having a certain experience at a certain time, I wasn't progressing on the same path as others until I had enough of my own organic practice form and became comfortable with, oh, everybody can experience different things at different times. And I was just curious if there's a recommended like minimum amount of time before people start joining these groups.
Yeah. In terms of time, I would say no, but I think a thought worth considering, and I'm not trying to be pejorative in what I'm about to say, okay? But what you don't want is having two blind squirrels trying to find a nut. You know, I mean, you have to have like some basic knowledge, some foundation, or someone who is going to be in relationship and a mentor with you that actually keeps you pointed in the right direction. But that can, once again, be at all kinds of different dimensions. I mean, I remember when I was very first starting my practice, and I didn't know anything and was kind of desperate to believe that I did know something. And I was very fortunate that I had a couple of people who were willing to slap me around and basically say, no, you know, you, in a very nice way, you got it wrong, but let's explore that, you know, in a very kind way. So it's helpful to have, I think the most fundamental thing is that both people in the relationship or in the group are committed to really being honest with each other, so that if we're confused, we admit we're confused, and then we seek out some clarification. And if somebody is really invested in something that is actually pointing their mind in the wrong direction, is inconsistent, that somebody raises that in the appropriate way. And that's a delicate thing unless everybody's agreed on that. And they keep revisiting that, yes, this is our aspiration. And, you know, it's not personal. I mean, this is a reciprocal aspiration for us to grow together on the path. So I think if you do that, it doesn't matter if you're just like a complete beginner or you have quite a bit of experience. if you're committed to those principles, you can work together. And I know over, many years of practice that I've not only had teachers really help me, but I've had other community members in our Sangha and in other Sanghas where this kind of honest give and take and sharing of experience, the sharing of experience is at the core of it, has just been invaluable. Okay, so just for closing, and then Robin, is there going to be a little, do I turn it back over to you after I do merit?
Yes, please. Yeah, we'll do
Okay.
some announcements. Thank
All right,
you.
well, I'll do this really short because we're bumping up against the witching hour. May the beautiful intentions really behind what we're doing tonight and the merit of what we're doing serve not only ourselves and our families and our friends, but beings wherever they live. In pointing all of our minds towards a deeper satisfaction and peace and away from suffering. So thank you very much.